Hello and welcome to the School Leadership Show. Mike is not here, so I will be doing this interview solo. I am Jen David Lang, and in addition to co-hosting this podcast, I also summarize education and leadership books as part of a subscription service called The Main Idea. Plus, I run online mastermind groups. If you are deeply committed to improving teaching and learning, take a look at The Main Idea and my mastermind groups for the tools to become an influential instructional leader. Through my work with The Main Idea, I look through hundreds of education and leadership books to choose just one a month to summarize for subscribers. And this month, I decided to choose a book about implementation science, basically how we can use research-based practices to make sure our initiatives and changes in schools really stick. So I chose to feature the book Implement with Impact, a strategic framework for leading school and district initiatives by Jenice Pizzuto and Stephen Carney. Jenice presents and she supports schools in their change efforts. She has successfully supported both large and small school districts to improve their outcomes, and she works with people in any educational setting to help them better achieve their goals. Stephen has been everything from a teacher to a district leader. He even had a role in opening two innovative high schools, and he also supports both small and larger educational institutions and is passionate about closing the implementation gap. So I will stop here. Welcome to both of you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Jen.
So glad you're here. Let's start with the basics. What led each of you to this work?
Moral imperative.
A moral imperative. Oh, good.
Quite,
Excellent.
quite
Great.
simply,
Great
I was
answer.
in Oklahoma, or it could have been Cleveland. The last few weeks, I've been everywhere, and honestly, I've had that same conversation because of the luxury of talking about implementation science with the schools and districts that I'm working with. And Stephen and I have worked together for many, many years. And we knew about professional learning and we knew about high quality professional learning. And we spent 5 years together working for Learning Forward and Learning School Alliances and helping to implement PLCs nationally and internationally. And then we learned about implementation science and our eyes were wide open. And we really dug deep into it. I had been doing implementation science for many, many years. And then we connected, and there's this gap. Like, we know what works in education. We have John Hattie's research. We have all the alphabets. We have SOR, PLC,
We do have a lot in
GBIS,
education.
MTSS. But what we have is we have a gap between what we know and what we do. And Stephen and I, rather than just sitting around talking about it at dinner or coffee, we decided we needed to do something about it. And after many years of research, and we went to Scotland together, we did some work around implementation science, worked with Global Implementation Society, and it really we didn't say we want to write a book about implementation science. It was born out of a moral imperative to help make sense of the science. We wanted to put our best effort at putting something out there to help stop the research to practice gap, because we have this huge gap between research and academia. I love and adore you, but you make it so complicated and complex. And a busy principal, a busy administrator, busy districts. It's like these scientists hadn't been in a school before. And Stephen and I have spent a lot of time in schools. And so we decided it really was it was a lot of coffee shops and late nights, but it was that moral imperative that kept us through those coffee shops and late nights.
That's great. Before you respond, Stephen, I want to say I think we have something in common because I also started The Main Idea because of this gap between knowledge that's out there and what our practitioners on the front line, school and district leaders are doing. And it's wonderful to write a 400-page book, but it's not going to actually change practice if people aren't reading it and don't have some very concrete ideas for how to implement. So I think we have the similar moral imperative. How about you, Stephen? Did you want to add to what led you to this work?
I think Janice answered it absolutely brilliant. Dot on. I think the only thing I would add is that, we also wanted to really make it simple, and bridge this gap with really a clear phased approach. And so that people can see themselves through those phases and through those stages and could evaluate, what they need to do next in an effective way.
Great. So
I
this
will
is
give a shout out to our publisher, Solution Tree, if I can, because
yes.
they really are the master at making sure we have pre-reproducibles that are teachable, learnable, doable, and that partnership was great in making sure that there are so many tools for people who use the book.
I appreciate you giving that shout out. I've been partnering with Solution Tree since I started the main idea in 2007, and they do a wonderful job with their authors as well as with, like you said, lots of handouts and online resources that when you get the book, you can also go online. So thanks for that. So implementation gap makes sense, right, between what is known out there and what we're implementing in schools. Could you define implementation science a little bit more for our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, it's like who's going to jump in here, right?
I know.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some really core aspects to implementation science, but really it's the study of how to effectively put evidence-based approaches, programs, or innovations, interventions into real world use, especially in complex systems like schools.
Yes.
I think it goes beyond asking like what works to what works for whom and under what conditions. And how can we do it, as we like to say in the book, well and right, or well and consistently?
Yeah.
So some of the, core aspects is bridging the knowing doing gap, focusing really on process and people as part of that component. It's evidence informed decision making, and its attention to the F word, which is fidelity and adaptation. And so I think, and then the last piece is really thinking about, then how do you sustain and scale the innovation itself? And so implementation science covers all of those areas.
That's great.
Yes.
Yeah. F
The
word.
really simple definition is
Yeah.
it's when how do we make something active? In education, we are great making things activating.
Yep.
So we buy things, we get the shiny object, but we don't get to the effective part. So implementation science is very purist, is active and effective.
Yes. Yeah. I liked in the book how you talked about that we spend time making sure that our programs are research based, right? When we're choosing a new program or curriculum, but then not necessarily the way we implement it.
Yeah, the Education Endowment Foundation actually I think has a really good phrase around that, which is it's not just what you implement, but how you do it that determines the success. And so, the how behind how you implement really absolutely matters when it comes to outcomes and results. Um, it- Implementation science also gives districts and school leaders really, I think, a structured way to manage the change.
Great
We
statement.
know that change is super hard, and a structured way to support our staff, and really monitor and support and improve the outcomes that we're needing to do most.
Well, and we'll go through that. We'll go through the stages in a moment. But before we go through the four stages that you outline of implementation science or implementing with impact as the title of your book, can you talk a little bit about why it's important to remember that change or implementation is human centered? Like, why is that so central to this process? And what's the framework you talk about, and you use the acronym IMPACT for the framework for that human-centered approach to change?
Yes, thank you so much. This is why that moral imperative, it's going to circle back to that because Stephen and I are learning centered for professional learning, having spent all those years with Learning Forward. And what we have designed is human and learning centered design elements. So it's human centered, but also learning centered. So we took the various sciences. So we have implementation science,
Yep.
change. There's a
Mm-hmm.
science around change, but there's also adult learning, andragogy, professional learning, and all of those elements and improvement science are embedded in the impact framework because we just weren't satisfied with any of them. And what we saw the big gap was that human and learning centered design components, because just adding human-centered design isn't quite enough, because what we have really focused on was, we know that especially our leadership, and talking to you, we have to think about how do we build the knowledge, skills, and attitudes of the people doing the work so they can do it competently, confidently, repeatedly, instead of this one and done. Like, you got training 3 times, or we bought it.
Yeah.
It's not enough. So we need to treat them with the dignity and human elements, but we also need to embed and ongoing and embedded adult learning to build the skills that they need to do the new thing. So it's
I'm
kind of a
glad you
long,
combine those all. Yeah, because I think we just forget sometimes, right? When you say
yes.
change, we don't think that's synonymous with learning. But think about just about any change you have in a school can't happen without the adults learning. And when adults learn, there are certain principles that lead to successful adult learning. And it's nobody's fault. Leaders are juggling so many different things, but we can tend to focus on the practices and the programs and the process, all the P words, but not the people who are doing the change, and both psychologically what it means to change, as well as the skills they need to change. So I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
Yes.
yeah, go
if you
ahead.
if you think about it in its simplest form, I mean, it's like the innovation itself is not what's making the change. It's the
Mhm.
people who are making the change. And so when you focus on the human side of implementation, you honor like the emotions, you honor the relationships, the mindsets, and then just the day-to-day realities of being an educator, and what it means to implement in this world. While teaching and getting results from students. Change is like super emotional for a lot of people. It's not just technical. And so sometimes these initiatives can actually trigger, fear, they can trigger resistance, being overwhelmed. And so when you have a human-centered approach, I think it absolutely recognizes that it recognizes that, and it provides the support and the voice and the empathy that people really need in order to make meaningful change. And so, as we know, buy-in isn't automatic; it's built. And so, we take the time by paying attention to the human aspect of change so that we can build that buy-in. And part of that is relationships. Relationships, I think, are key, really a key feature to driving implementation. And so that's through collaboration and trust, and then kind of like a shared leadership model or a shared implementers model that we're all part of this together. On top of all the other things we know about change, like building capacity and then sustaining that change over changing contexts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you came up with this acronym IMPACT, these sort of 6 areas to keep in mind to make
Mhm.
sure when you're going through the 4 stages of implementation, you keep the human elements in mind. And you
Right.
have, this acronym IMPACT to make sure that leaders think about inclusion, meaningful leadership, professional learning, assessing and adjusting, collective efficacy, and team. So I'm wondering if one of you could take the first 3 and just briefly explain what is it we're supposed to be thinking about as we implement change in our schools. Would someone start with inclusion, meaningful leadership, and professional learning? You already touched on these, obviously,
Yeah.
before,
Which
but
ones do you want, Stephen?
You go ahead, I'll take what's left.
Okay, I'll start with inclusion, and I will talk about inclusion through the lens of linking back to change. I want to say one of the things we forget about in education, that change is really about the ABCs, adult behavior change. So if we're going to do a new thing, a new initiative, and every implementation is an event that where you're asking people to learn something new, and we created this acronym to help it make it sticky, but also each letter has its own really important thing. And I is inclusion. And it means including stakeholders in the co-design, co-create, co-learn. So we like to say nothing about us without us. And that's a hard one. People sometimes like, oh, we don't need the teachers, or we don't need whoever's doing the new thing is often not included in designing the
Yeah,
process.
yeah, the students, right?
The students. So we want to get voices, and it doesn't need to be super complicated. Sometimes, yes, we can have them on the team, but you can use surveys, you can use interviews, you can do little audits. There's lots of ways to have inclusion, but we want to include the people that are involved in the change in the change effort. And we also want to look at a lot of different components in inclusion, looking at what is evidence-based practice, talking about those essential components that we already have pretty dialed in. But meaningful leadership, is I think something that again makes our book um, revelationary. Honestly, I've had people tell me for people it's thinking about leadership is not a title or a person. It's the collective power. It's a collective network of power within the team. So we have leadership horizontally and vertically throughout the organization. We encourage systems level teams, implementation teams, and campus level teams. And on those teams, you have stakeholders that are involved. And what we really advocate for, and we invite you to think about having a collective decision making process. So it's not the person with the title that makes the final decision, but collectively, we're having a robust, rigorous conversation around what we're going to do. We have evidence-based practices, then the team is going to decide what's the best next thing for us to do, what resources we need. So you have a decision-making process, use agendas and tools and protocols. FISTA 5, people are familiar with, we encourage that. But that meaningful leadership is having those horizontal and vertical structures. So we have, it's the PEP cycle, thinking about how we have communication loops, but also being really true in those human elements, as Stephen so eloquently stated about the relationships and trust and empathy. And then when we get to the P, that's the really big, big piece, is this is what gets missing. People, we don't have the luxury in education to pause and think about what professional learning do the adults, ABCs, adult behavior change, what's going to be necessary for the staff to learn to be able to do the new thing with competence and then confidence and really, really well. So we, in that section, talk about a lot of ideas and tools that there's a lot of great stuff out there. So you can build a long-term backward mapped professional learning plan.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and we also believe, by the way, we believe that for every dollar you spend on the innovation, you should spend 4 times the amount on professional learning.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. I love concrete numbers, former math teacher. For every dollar you should spend $4. Yeah. People always say to me, I plan a lot of professional learning, that you should spend 2 hours planning every 1 hour professional learning. And I spend way more than
The
that.
same,
Jim
same.
Knight says 30.
Who says 30?
Jim Knight.
Oh, Jim Knight. Okay.
Yes, I spent 5 years with him, and he's like, and I think not like once you get going, but like when you're really creating, it's a
Yeah,
big deal to get it right.
it
But we
is. But
don't want to freak
all right,
people
we
out.
digress. But yeah, so
Yeah.
when $4 for every on professional learning for every dollar that goes into
The
purchasing whatever
innovation.
program.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
and Jenice and I can't own that. That actually just came from Joelle and Killian. And I know you know Joellen as well, Jen, don't you?
Oh, she's amazing. Yes, I've
Yeah.
sub for both
So
of them. She's wonderful. Yeah.
yeah. So what letters am I?
Sorry, you are
ACT.
assess and adjust collective
ACT.
efficacy.
I am assess and adjust. I mean, really, the rest is pretty self-explanatory. If you really assess and adjust is really about that process of, assessing the implementation. So you're spending the time actually, um, uh, not assessing just the outcome, but actually assessing the implementation and the implementation components. So you're doing implementation audits. Are we doing what we said we were going to do? Is implementation looking the way it needs to look, sound, and feel? And then we're making adjustments based off of a variety of different things. So we may see that we've got the third grade team that's implementing some components well, and the fourth grade, different components well. What adjustments do we need to make to our implementation model or our support or our professional learning to get them more aligned?
Can I just poke in about that? And Doug Reeves says that, often we'll start an initiative, right? And then we
Yeah.
say it's not working and we abandon it before assessing what percent of the teachers are actually implementing it. So you
Yes.
might be abandoning something that works perfectly well. It's just that people aren't doing it, right?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So that really is what this is. This is different than what you typically see in, performance models where you're assessing the outcomes. We're really assessing the implementation here is the key focus. Collective efficacy, obviously that was coined after, Albert Bandura. But really this is about creating the structures and the culture to generate collective efficacy. We know that we don't get full fidelity or full implementation unless we have collective efficacy. So you're just blending those two together to say, in order to get the implementation that we're looking for, we need to all believe that we can actually pull this off as well.
Yeah, without the mindset, it's not going to happen.
Yep. And
Yeah.
then team is really the I think probably what pulls all of this together is this last one, which is team. And it's it's beyond just the concept of yes, we have to do this as a team. It's really pulling together a team that is a laser focus on the implementation itself. And the people that are on this team is not positional leadership. Yes, you may include positional leadership, but you also want people who are really good at data. You also want people who are the implementers as a part of this team because they're the ones that are sitting in the seat going, what's working and what's not working, and why I can't implement the way that, we've spelt it out. So it's really asking all stakeholders to be a part of that and analyze and support the implementation method. So they're also the ones who are designing and coming up with the implementation plan that Jenice talked about. They're also the ones that are identifying the kinds of supports that the implementers need through an implementer's lens. So yeah.
And that's a perfect transition from the team to the first stage, where you assemble a team. So, just for people listening, in the book, they've outlined 4 stages, and I thought that maybe they could speak to them quickly. The first one is decide, the second one is plan and prepare, the third is implement, and the fourth is spread and sustain. So, if you have a new initiative or a change or a curriculum or something you want to put into place in your school, and you want to follow their steps. The first one is decide, which starts with assembling a team. And you may think, oh, I've got lots of teams, but there's something special about that. So, would one of you start with the decide stage and what that involves? Maybe Jenice?
Yeah, great. Yeah. Decide is really important. And we are good at this stage. We decide what we want to do. So we have evidence-based practices back to we know what works. The piece that we would like to add and decide is forming this inclusive team. So I think that's one of the things that is unique. And
Hmm.
we want to have this thought out carefully. This is a guiding coalition of champions. This is not our naysayers. It's not like, hey, can we get this? And I'm still working with a school district where we started out, we're like, but we really want to get the reluctant people. Can you change them for me? I'm like, no. So that's not the place for them. So you carefully decide who's going to be the champions of this initiative and who's going to help build it. We believe that they should be able to have a little bit of a systems lens. We have, which is like, so if I'm really narrowed into my content or my grade level, this may not be the best, right? But they also need to be people who have credibility with the staff and they're willing to work collectively. It's really important to select your team carefully. And I believe it's chapter 3, where we have a really nice checklist and tools for how to think about. Like I love it's not a checklist. Solution Tree, I love you, but they wanted it to be a checklist. So here's some team characteristics and behaviors. And the way we have it, it's like, I'm rocking it, or this is something I can strive for, or this is something that's not me. And so with that list, we want to have a compilation of skills. We don't all need to have the same skills. And we don't need everybody to check every box, but you do need to have that team. The other thing you're going to do and decide is think about identify the problem based on data. So really identifying using some sort of a fishbone or a root cause analysis or a SWOT, but it's like you're looking at your data to make the decision. We're not selecting something because District B was using it and I saw it at a conference. We really want to be careful about how we decide what we put forth, and that'll help us lead into the next stage really effectively.
And I want to add something, I like that it's not just like you as the leader define the problem and give it to the team, but that part of it is naming the problem. I'm not entirely sure if this is an accurate quote, but it reminds me of Einstein saying, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 about the solution, right? You could waste the whole team's time by solving the wrong problem. So I like that they take the time, to do that.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I think the whole point behind that is actually to resist solutionitis.
Yes, and we use that word in there, and they're like, "Is it a real word?" It is. And one of the things is we really encourage you to do that with a team, because otherwise you're telling them what to do,
yeah,
and that's not human centered. And I don't have the like we really want to have that co-learning and co-design. So if at all possible, you probably have it in your back pocket. Like we
yeah.
have an idea of what, but something may surface from another team member that really identifies a bigger problem or a root problem.
So that you're also then part of that stage then once you've done that is you're developing your goal, of course, but then you're also identifying what is the evidence-based solution. And we talk a lot about in the book about making sure it is an evidence-based solution because that will lay out the active ingredients to the implementation because there's evidence behind like what made that effective. But then the last piece I think which a lot of people really forget is assessing then the readiness and identifying is the team, is the organization ready now to actually move into a change, move into a new initiative, move into a solution, and begin an implementation process.
If you
If
have a
not,
perfect solution, but the wrong time.
that's exactly it.
Yeah. And you created an implementation readiness tuning protocol, which is linked again, Solution Tree on their website if people
Yeah,
want to assess the readiness of their organization for whatever change.
that's dot on.
Yeah. And then the second step is then to move to plan and prepare.
Yeah.
Stephen, you want to take that?
Sure. I think this is the foundation, fully. I think this is really about translating the why and the what into structured actions.
Hmm.
It's really developing what is the organization's capacity to implement the identified change effectively and efficiently. It really is the meticulous planning and preparation process that we don't probably give a ton of weight to. We think that we can solve it through doing one training and what have you, but this is really planning out your entire implementation process. So, like key activities would be what are the active ingredients to the innovation itself, and the active ingredients are really the things that make it work, that make it successful. And then, by the way, there's also a identifying then what are the implementation strategies you're going to use for that implementation. And there's a great resource that we put in the book it's called ERIC, but it's not the same ERIC that we're all familiar with when we did research and we go to the ERIC list. It's called Expert Recommendations for Implementing Change. Um, and that list is a great list to start out to say what are the key activities that are going to help us um, implement this innovation right and well. So we provide that in there. And then really developing a plan to monitor the implementation by looking at fidelity, uh, acceptability. I'm trying to see if I can remember them all. Feasibility, and
Reach.
reach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a like this, put some time and energy into this part of the process. Yes, you could come back and refine this because it's all in pencil. But really, if you skip this stage or do this, partial, um, you'll probably be at the end saying, "I wonder why this implementation didn't work the way we wanted it to work." And now we're thinking it's the solution, and we throw that solution out
So let me ask you two things. So stage one and stage two, right? Decide, plan, and prepare. We haven't implemented a thing.
at all.
What kind of time frame? I mean, so we're recording this in late June, and some schools are going to start in August or September. Let's say, a school wants to, I don't know, infuse instruction with AI, right? And they have that, like, how long and I know there's not one single number, but about how much time should you set aside for the decide and plan and prepare stages?
Oh, it really depends on the initiative.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. The good news is there's no rubber stamp. The bad news is there's no rubber stamp. So if you're thinking about a big ELA adoption, for example,
Yeah.
we would really, and what implementation science, what the evidence is, the science says it's really you need almost nobody wants almost a year to plan and prepare.
Okay.
And then you start to roll out to implement. It doesn't mean you're not doing anything along the way. You're kind of getting started and you're doing these things. But there are times when, hey, I'm working with a school district in Oklahoma right now. We're going to meet. They're talking about things. They're talking about a few instructional practices. The team is going to make a plan next week
Yeah.
and they're going to start to roll out. So they didn't have to go through a big, because they looked at what do you currently have. It matters what you have in place. So if they already have an instructional framework, they already have some of these, they've already done a lot of learning. So look at what you have in place and
Right.
just don't, that readiness tool is so powerful. I mean, it really does help you. And I think looking at the stages, and another thing that is really, I think is helpful in the book is each stage has a key decisions. And again, it's not a checklist, right? It's key decisions and actions. And you might look at, oh, we've done you. So you can quickly go, well, we've already done X, Y, Z. We've done 8 out of 10 of these. I think we can move into the plan and prepare. So we are all about efficiency and effectiveness. We don't want to don't do things just to go through a process. So, but make sure that you have the process in place and you're not skipping forward, because quite often we adopt and then we abandon and we blame the thing rather than we didn't look to see if we actually did it the way it was designed.
But it
Yeah,
helps in the ballpark that it might take a year for some
Yeah.
team
yeah,
school.
for a really big initiative, you want to take the time that's needed. I mean, there are other things. I mean, we worked with a district that, we went and spent 3 days with them and helped them map this whole process out in 3 days for an initiative they were rolling out in the fall.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely doable, but there's some variables like who's on the team that's making this happen. And yeah, the book is like really the tools and the resources in the book are really going to help a team navigate that. So it's really how fast, as well does the team and how big is the initiative? How many active ingredients are there? If there's only like 2 active ingredients, this could probably be done in a day or two
Yep.
to work through those stages.
I want to be sensitive to your time, but I do want to get through the other two stages. And I
Yep.
am also curious in both of because you both work on this full time, which of the four stages do you think, or when we botch implementation, which of the four stages do you think is the one we most, don't do the most thorough job? So you can share it now or when you describe a stage.
All right. I'll jump into implement.
Okay, third stage. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
third stage. And really this is where the magic happens. I love it. We're getting into implement and we're starting to do things. And to answer your question, what happens is we decide and then we jump right to implement. We skip right over plan and prepare. That's that's the we
That's
really
the traditional route.
that's the most efficient. It's most traditional. It is. Everyone can be in the confessional for that. I would be like, oh yes, we did it. Or we do a one and done, or I call it pigeon PD. We fly in, we drop a load, and we fly out, and we don't think about what really implementation science has drivers of coaching, mentoring, that leadership. We need to make sure, and maybe if we have those in, you might be able to go quicker, but we need to attend to the building the knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And then implement, we're going to start doing the work. And now that we've got the training and we've got that, but we're also, one of the things I want to call attention to and implement, we have something that is, Stephen started to allude to, design the monitoring process in plan and prepare, but during implement, and this is the magic, the implementation team monitors the implementation in a collective, co-design, co-learn, co-working manner. So the learning walks that are designed in the book, they're not walkthroughs, they're not evaluations. These are learning walks that are monitoring, are we doing what we said we're going to do? If not, what's getting in the way? If yes, is it working? And then the team gathers that data and comes back and uses a data protocol.
Yeah.
Something from Wellman and Lipton is what I would love. And they look at their implementation plan. And if they're at 80%, then move on to something new. If we're at 60%, we say, oh, like I have a group that they were good. They're doing UFly, which is a reading program. Everybody across all 5 schools, everyone was missing like mostly step 3 and step 4. So they didn't need to think about step 1 through 5 or whatever 8, but they knew now their professional learning was designed to about what the need was, where there was low implementation. So in implement, gather system-wide data, look at it, and see, are we doing it? Is it working? If yes, keep doing it, get to 80%. If not, provide some learning for people to build their skills.
So to clarify again, as a numbers person, so you're saying so 80%. So if your initiative is being implemented by 80% of the teachers, that's good.
With fidelity. We'd like to say integrity.
Fidelity.
Yes.
We're not looking for 100% to know that it's fully implemented, but
no.
that is the more reasonable number.
Yeah. Think about it like the triangle for RTI or MTSS. If we can get up to 80% of staff doing the new thing with some proficiency, we're always going to have some or few that are going to need some more intensive coaching. So we might, then provide that, but we want to get the system going. And then that leads you to sustainability, which I'll let Stephen wrap that up.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that the 80% also allows, because you have 80% of the staff there doing that to fidelity, that allows for when you have changeover. You'll have enough people in the building to help support that changeover versus if you typically see maybe we've got, a handful of folks who are implementing it right and well, and as they disappear, so does the whole initiative. Spread and sustain. This was our shortest chapter. We spent a lot of time on the first 3 stages. Basically, spread sustain is really navigating that implementation now through sustainability. So once you've gotten to, you want to start thinking about spreading sustain once you've got about 50% of implementers that regularly employing it, with the target of shooting for that 80%. But you can start moving to that sustaining piece when you at least have about 50%, because now you're thinking about, how am I sustaining this practice? How do I plan for turnover? What partnerships do I need to make in order to maintain this momentum? How do we continue to monitor and support even after we get to the 80%, so that it doesn't kind of fizzle out over time, or as leadership changes or people change, we can continue the high level of fidelity, and then constantly rewarding and celebrating the implementation success is a way to keep that front and center in order to sustain that movement. So, for example, we worked in a district where they started implementing PLCs. It was MTSS and PLCs, but like years ago. And we finally found out like there's like 5 people left in the entire district that participated in that training. But they could not figure out why they weren't getting high fidelity, because like we all did the training. They didn't have a sustainability plan to sustain that implementation effort. And so that's what this chapter leads into, is really, how do you sustain this effort? And so it gives some great tools and some strategies to keep that movement. I'd like to write a whole another book on just the stage itself. I think it deserves more attention as well. So.
And it's wonderful that you get people to think about the sustain stage, even before they have started.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, and it does sound like both of you were saying perhaps the plan and prepare stage might be the one that people most skip when they find their implementations aren't working.
100%.
Yes. And I just want to note, for subscribers of the Main Idea, Stephen has offered to do a workshop on these stages and these human-centered principles. Yay! I believe we chose September 17th, so look for that in my email. Can you share with people how they can learn more about your work?
Yeah, you can find me at Impact Lead Succeed, and you can just Google that, or it's Jenice at Impact Lead Succeed. And if you want some help with your implementation work or sustainability or teaming or change, we can do that. Together we're better. And so looking for support, that's fine.
Mine sounds like Jenice's as well. Mine's Impact Learn and Lead .com. So, and just go there, and if you're able to find me, just fine. You also can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find Jenice on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. Great. Well, we have been chatting about the book, Implement with Impact, a strategic framework for leading school and district initiatives. Thank you, Jenice Pizzuto and Steve Carney. I appreciate you taking the time, and stay cool. We have a heat wave here in New York City. Sounds like Dallas too might be kind of hot. So thank you again. I really appreciate your time. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.